G'day there, ladies and ladies. I think it's safe to say that time is convoluted in the world of Pokemon. Although I prefer not to bring on the anime, Ash being 10 years old further kinda permeates throughout the Pokemon community. Not only that, but you can have a nap that fully restores your Pokemon in 30 seconds. If you manage to alter the clock for some games, it will update in real time, resulting in instant day-night shift. Time fully stops for others when you climb a ladder. No matter what way you want to explore time, I think we can all agree that it is wacky, and shouldn't be considered too seriously. So today's video is going to be a bit more of a joke. I want to see how far I can push the limits of Pokemon reality to discuss a question we all probably have had at one point. How long is a turn in Pokemon? This is a question I haven't seen brought up, or at least not quite explored, and for good reason. It is kind of hard to define how long things take. No yet, but there are so many moves and abilities that quantitating how long each one takes to perform would be nightmarish. You've heard of the speed of sound. How about the speed of growl? Is it just the sound aspect of it? Is there a wind-up? Should we measure this by how long the Pokemon cry takes? Needless to say that examining some of the shorter duration of moves isn't going to get us anywhere. So many examples and so much vague data that we are better off looking at larger times. Looking specifically at larger times will give us the potential longest time a Pokemon turn can take. Now this will not be perfect because we will need to use this data to help calculate the average time across everything. But if you would humor me, we can find the longest turn in Pokemon and just have a good time laughing at the absurdity that they have in the games. Okay, so for this video, I have come up with 3 examples that should expand our concept of time. The first one is about berries with the ability Harvest. Harvest returns an eaten berry 50% of the time at the end of turn. This is upgraded to 100% if weather is sunny. What does that mean in terms of time? Harvest in our world refers more to the quantity of berries rather than the time to grow. A good harvest happens at the same time but yields more berries. A bad harvest yields less berries. This perspective on harvest doesn't really benefit this discussion, as we can't define extra berries as time. Maybe someone more knowledgeable than I would be able to, but I think I'm going to shift back towards the game mechanics. Now let's assume that the weather is sunny, so we don't need to be concerned with probability. There's a 100% chance to grow or reuse a berry every turn. Personally, I prefer growing a berry rather than the implications of somehow reusing the same berry. We now have something to go off. Now we can't just jump to conclusions and say that it takes months. In the Pokemon world, growing berries takes a drastically shorter amount of time than in our world. Most berries in Pokemon take 2 to 3 days to grow. Different berries have different times, and it also depends on the type of mulch used and how much water they get. So let's just assume that it will take 3 days to grow a berry. Our time conversion is simple, as we get 1 berry a turn. So a turn in Pokemon using Harvest as our measurement takes 3 days. Now if that seems long, then perhaps you should find a nice spot to sit down, because the next examples are even longer. Our second case study of Pokemon time revolves around the move Rest. It sounds simple on theory, maybe only 8 hours, but let me break down what rest actually means, and you will see what I mean. If anyone underestimates some power sleep, direct them to this video, as rest is actually super strong. On the first turn of rest, the user converts any existing status condition into sleep, accepts sleep itself, and restores HP to 100%. Now HP in terms of Pokemon relates to overall health. A low health Pokemon could be injured or sick, for example. Now if you want to treat fainting a Pokemon as death, that's fine. However, I think of it more as intended, a faint. A condition where your body refuses to operate as you go into critical life support mode. And so things like broken bones would count as low health conditions rather than fainted. Rest heals your HP, so it heals basically any injury. The only thing it doesn't heal is PP, which can be tied to fatigue in terms of Pokemon. A little funny fact is that this means that you can get tired of resting. Anyway, some injuries are more vague than others, so I wanted to find something to help define how long it takes. That's where status conditions come in. Now, we could equate paralysis as muscle atrophy, or poison as food poisoning, or terminal illness, but they're still vague enough that you could make an argument for anything. Frozen isn't really possible to understand, at least not for humans, which only leaves one status to try to understand rest: burn. With burns being classified into multiple levels, it gives the most perfect approximation into how long it takes to recover. The hardest part is determining which level of burn to use. Looking at the source of the burn, the only one that doesn't involve direct flames is gold. I know mechanically your Pokemon is on fire by water, but just ignore that for now. Now, because water becomes steam at 100 degrees Celsius, it helps ground into reality the burn potential. Think of it this way: what's the temperature difference between Ember and Firelust? Hard to say, but with gold we have a range of temperature to use. After doing a small amount of research, boiling water can be a first or second degree burn. I think going with a second degree burn makes sense, as the side effect of burn is that your attack has been reduced. While first degree burn would still be painful, I think in terms of functionality you could still perform well enough. Second degree burn is where it really starts to hurt from basic movements, hence the reduction in attack. And so with all that out of the way, healing from a second degree burn can take about 2 to 3 weeks. Let's say that you heal the burn on turn 1, maybe this equates to 2 weeks. You then have 2 more turns to recover from a mess, so the other 2 turns equates to 1 week. It's a bit weird to have available time per turn, so let's just say that you have 3 weeks over 3 turns, so 1 turn of Pokemon is 1 week of your time. More than Harvest for sure, but are you ready for what comes next? final case study to prove the absurdity of time in Pokemon comes from a weather move. You might be wondering about why weather. Surely it's just a day, right? Maybe extend into a week if you stretch it. Perhaps you would be correct, but one such weather ability can be interpreted as even longer. Drought. It's an ability that creates only weather for 5 turns or 8 turns if the Pokemon holds a heat rock. Now when it comes to drought, let's look at long-term droughts. The shortest amount of time of low precipitation needed for it to be considered a drought is 6 months. Already this is by far the longest we have so far, but let's continue. There isn't really a cutoff point. It can scale indefinitely given the correct conditions. If we are considering extreme long-stage droughts that are part of climate, then there was one that lasted 45,000 years. Very impressive for sure, but maybe you don't feel comfortable with that kind of long-term data. Who is to say that there wasn't any rain whatsoever throughout it, or enough at least to cancel the drought? I hear you. So let's try some smaller numbers. Doing some research, I found that droughts are anywhere between a year, a decade, maybe 15 years, up to maybe even 150 years or so. This is one of those things that has so much variability that can be pretty much anything. Now calculating average drought lengths would require so much time and energy for me to do, more so than what a Pokemon Focus episode should require. So let's say that we're having 10 years as our most possible longest drought. Now we have a range of 6 to 120 months for 5 to 8 turns. On the low end, we have 6 over 5 months per turn. Assuming a month is 30 days, each turn would take 36 days. On the high end, we have 120 over 8, which thankfully gives us a nice whole number of 15 months per turn, or 450 days per turn. Of course, we can go higher, but having more than a year per turn should be enough of a baseline. And so yeah, time is convoluted. Using 3 examples of how long a turn in the Pokemon world could be, we have some funny numbers. Believe it or not, on the low end, a turn will take 3 days, and on the high end, a turn could take 15 months or more. Knowing this, it will probably save you some time in the world of Pokemon if you don't engage in turn-based battles. A repel will make it easier for you to get to meetings on time. And with the video completed, let me know if you have other potentially long moves, or if you found this topic fun or intriguing. Thank you for watching.